So we've been talking about data and information management systems and why people need it. And so what Ulrich was saying is often organizations have questions that they feel intuitively the data should be able to answer, but they're struggling to get those answers out of the system. And that's how and why they come to us. So we've worked with quite a few different clients, big, small, mostly in the healthcare domain. Maybe one of you, if you can talk a little bit about the kind of questions that organizations have. So what are the problems that they feel should be able to be solved with the data that they've been collecting all these years?
I mean, it's often very simple. Sometimes it's as simple as how many patients do we have. Those would be the simple ones, right? It's just basic aggregate statistics that you feel there should be a source of truth for that. And often that's what we need to create. So it's all the way going from simple statistics like that to where would be the optimal place to put a new clinic. That's a question that's a lot harder to answer. That often involves modeling. It's a complicated question. It might involve machine learning, advanced data wrangling. So it's quite a wide spectrum of problems that people come with. Yeah, so wide ranging.
Yeah, so to add to that, in the past we've had clients who come with questions on how they can improve the way they have been doing things. So they are producing reports or dashboards, maybe annually, but the process takes way long because most of the process is manual. So they have to use different systems to extract the data, spend a lot of time, and that happens every year. So those are some of the other kind of questions that clients would come to us to help them with.
Okay, so it's either we can't get the answer to this question, even though we think the data is there, or we can, but it's a very painful, slow process. This shouldn't be this painful. Okay, I understand. And then if that is a very common challenge for many organizations, why isn't there then a off-the-shelf solution that you can just add to your cart, as it were, in the same way that I don't have to contact a consulting company if I wanted a piece of software that helps me write documents. I can just buy Microsoft Word, or I can just use Google Docs. There's no questions anymore. It's a solved problem. It's a commodity. It costs whatever, a few dollars per month. Why is that not true for data information management systems, if that's also something that every organization wants and needs?
That's a very good question. And the short answer is there is no solution. There is no one solution that fits all organizations, because different organizations have different ways of doing things. They have different source systems. They even have different capabilities when it comes to the human resources. So context plays a very big role when it comes to choosing your tool for data and information management systems. That's why you find, unlike an email or a document software, where context doesn't really play a big role, it's easy to find off-the-shelf solutions that works for most organizations.
Yeah, maybe just to add to that, so I feel like sometimes it does feel like there's an add to cart button. I think, I mean, we see this in the cloud providers. It often feels like you are just clicking add to cart, but even with that answer, there's no one thing you click add to cart to solve all of your problems. It's often it's a combination of different things that you're adding to your cart to build the information management system. And I think that's where it becomes really difficult. It becomes difficult to choose the right tools for your situation and your organization. So I think that's kind of what makes it difficult, and often that, like Emanuel said, that depends on the organization. It depends on their goals. There are many trade-offs you make when picking that tools, and I guess that's kind of where this conversation is heading. Is what are those trade-offs in picking these tools?
Mm-hmm. So you used an important word. You said build the solution. You didn't say buy the solution, and so it makes me think. When I decide I want a house, yes, you can buy a house, and then you have to live with the decisions that the previous owner has made. But if I want a house that's optimally fit for my needs, or my family's needs, I need to build one. And I can't go to the house shop and I can't like configure the house and say add to cart. What I can do is I can go to all sorts of hardware stores and other stores and pick windows, pick tiles, pick installation material. And then indeed, as you, I think, allude to, the problem is there's so much choice, there's so many options. I don't know what I'm saying yes or no to. I don't know where that takes me in terms of energy bill, some years down the line, in terms of total cost or eco-friendliness. I have all these things that I want to optimize or at least be aware of, and I don't know. I can't read thousands of pages of documentation for each little tool. So maybe that's why one typically hires an architect and a builder and an expert who can guide you. Is that what we are then? To our clients, we are the expert architect to help them decide what should be built.
Yes, to a degree. I think that the house is a good example, because I mean you don't always know a year down the line or 10 years down the line, what is my electricity bill going to be in the winter. I wanted a pool. I thought that would be really amazing, but now I need to fill that pool every week and I need to keep it topped up, and that costs money. So I guess our role is to understand the different technologies, to understand what are the trade-offs that you're making when you pick one tool above another, because that is the main thing when we're picking tools. It is trade-offs. There are cost trade-offs. There are all kinds of different trade-offs we're making when picking those tools. And the reason I say build is because it's add to cart, but it still needs to be configured. That's the one thing about data. There's no, every company's database, data sets look different. There are, of course, some sources that are a bit more standardized. If you're using accounting software or CRMs, these things are a bit more standardized. But a lot of data and a lot of the data we work with is bespoke, and every time you have to integrate that into a system, it ends up being a bespoke solution. Although the tool you're using to then wrangle the data and play with it ends up being an add to cart, you still have to configure it.
Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit more about the challenge of providing a solution to every client when every client's needs are different. So, Emanuel, when we engage with a client, a new client, and they say, we've got this challenge, we've got this problem, can you help us? What does the journey look like to decide, yes, we can help you, or no, actually we can't? How do we get from this initial vague query to here's the proposed solution, here's how we believe we can solve your problem?
Okay, thank you. So we usually tend to start with a discovery workshop where we get to meet with the key stakeholders from different departments and try to understand what are their needs, what are their goals, and what are their objectives, together with their pain points. Then from this workshop, we will consolidate all the thoughts into a single document, commonly known as the business requirements a specification document that will contain both the technical and the functional requirements. And this document will serve as our blueprint for any solution that we are going to build. Once we are all aligned and we are happy that the BRS actually represents the needs for the organization, then we proceed and develop a proposal that will either tackle the entire scope or a particular subset of the requirements based on what is currently required. Then once we have that proposal, throughout the process, we tend to think from the solution and work our way up.
Okay. Can you unpack that? So what does it mean to start from the solution and work your way back?
Yeah, so I think that's important. That's because it's often, we like to refer to it as an artifact. So it's the, it's the dashboard at the end of the day that the public gets to see, or maybe if it's an internal dashboard, it's the exco who gets to see that dashboard. And the BRS kind of hopes to outline what this thing is we're going to be showing. Is it a model? Is it, are we building a platform for other data scientists to use? Because that's quite important, right? Is it an end-to-end solution and there are no other humans involved in the road to showing the value, or are we building something that other people can use? And those are important things to take into consideration. But what that artifact is often kind of ends up defining what the platform will look like. So the skills of the people involved who are going to use the platform, that kind of defines, what you're building, how much coding is going to be involved in the platform. Do you want no-code solutions, where non-technical people can also use the system, make changes, have inputs, or are we dealing with a company where they have a very good technical team, and maybe their people are able to write code and write SQL and produce their own reports? Trade-offs like this kind of get defined by eventually what the outputs are that we're asked to build.
So if I may go back to the analogy of the house, as a non-specialist in houses, I may not really know all of so I definitely don't know all of the options for building the house. But it's worse, I also don't really know what a house could be. For instance, I may not think about an elevator that allows me to have a rooftop bar or something. And unless the architect asks me, do you want a rooftop bar? I'm not going to say I do or I don't want this. Or he or she might ask, do you want this house to be passive so you don't have to put in energy, or do you want it to be off the grid? How similar must it be to your neighbors? Do you care that you're standing out, or do you actually want to stand out? So there's all these properties, aspects, consequences of building a house that you may not realize when you contact an architect and say, can you build a house for me or design a house for me? And so my question, if we use that analogy, is, in your experience, how much of the conversation is driven by the client saying, I want A, B, C, D, E? How much is the result of you asking questions at the start? And then how much is actually being discovered as you are showing the plans, the design, and now that they see the mock-up, or you explain what it will look like and what it can do, then the conversation advances in terms of trade-offs and pros and cons and all of that.
Yeah. So I think that's a very good question and comment, because maybe just going back to the previous question. So if we have the BRS, and at the end of the day, at the end of the BRS, you end up writing a proposal, right? Someone needs to sit down and design and draw the architecture. We create a plan, we pick our technologies, we look at all the trade-offs, and we give a plan. But we were just talking about this beforehand. It's almost guaranteed that the thing you end up building won't look like the plan, because often we find ourselves, once you actually start interacting with the system, you start looking at the data, you work with the people, there are finer nuances that show themselves. Maybe the team is not as technical as you expected, or maybe the dashboard is more complicated than you thought. Calculating the metrics involve multiple steps, and it becomes a bit more difficult to build. And these nuances often show themselves once you start building, once you start working with the technologies. Maybe the assumption you made about the size of the data was not right. These are all little things that kind of show themselves whilst you're building. And you need to kind of be flexible and take that into account, because, like I said, the BRS is there and the proposal is there to uncover information, to understand, and the questions we ask at that point are really important, and they kind of end up defining what we build. But if we're kind of stuck with incomplete information at that point, you end up discovering that information whilst you're building, and then you have to pivot. But we do know this, right? So when you are putting a platform together, we have a degree of flexibility, the ability to. We often work with tools that kind of can integrate with each other. We like to build in a modular way, so it shouldn't be a big change to switch from one tool to another.
Emanuel, did you want to add something?
Yeah, so basically what I wanted to say is during the entire process, we always have back and forth conversations with the client, just to make sure that we are aligned, and if there are changes that needs to be made, because maybe the tool that we initially thought would meet the needs doesn't meet the needs. So we do have these engagements and to make sure that we are aligned, and what we choose and the solution that we build, they feel empowered, they feel that they have been part of the process of building that solution.
Right.
And I think that's quite an important point that Emanuel makes, is the feeling of collaboration whilst building is really important, because I think as people who are guiding other companies in putting together data infrastructure, you don't want to be the people who you go and lock yourself in a room for 6 months and you come back with the solution, and then the client tells you, oh, well, you built the wrong thing. That's not what we expected. So the collaboration aspect is really important, and being flexible to change based on feedback. That is really important in the process of putting together the infrastructure, building the house. Maybe the color of the walls you wanted changes, or you realize you don't want a swimming pool. Actually, you want a big lawn for your dog to play in. And this you often discover once you start living in it.
What's your sort of approach to avoiding missing each other in communication? Because the work you do and the technology you engage with is extremely technical, and so if somebody asks me, or asks you rather, what's the difference between this piece of technology and that piece of technology, the real answer is hard to follow, potentially. And it's nuanced, and maybe it's relevant or not relevant to the client. But so my question is, how do you not get stuck in jargon and lost in translation, essentially?
That's a difficult question to answer, because I think that's something we've gotten right in the past, and it's something we've gotten wrong as well. Because often these things do get lost in translation, and I mean, we're speaking in metaphors here as well. We have the metaphor of the house, and often that's kind of what you have to end up doing when you're speaking to non-technical users, is kind of thinking of metaphors. But I think the thing we found very valuable is just meeting regularly. We like what we call sprint reviews. So having a check-in every 2 weeks, having a look at what we're building, checking in with the client if this is still meeting their needs, if this is meeting their expectations. And there we rely on feedback. And the goal there is to kind of to foster the idea of collaboration. Like I said, we don't want to be the people locking ourselves. You don't want to be the person locking yourself in a room and building something and then throwing it over the wall, and now they have to use this thing you've put together for them. You kind of want the person you're building for to feel like they're a part of what you're building, and they have a say in what they get at the end of the day. So that collaboration aspect is really important. But yeah, difficult to do when the language gets technical, when it gets really deep into trade-offs between serverless compute versus managing your own infrastructure, when it becomes nuanced questions like that. And I think that's where our clients rely on us making the right call, given their constraints and their situation.
Yeah, I think something that we've done in the past is if we are comparing different pieces of technology and we want to choose which one we are going to implement for the client, sometimes we would create a table, a matrix that shows the different tools, and against that we have all the different requirements, so that by the end of the day, the tool that we are choosing still meets all the requirements that we clearly outlined in the BRS.
Right. Cool. So what I'm hearing you say is, rather teaching the client the language we speak, we need to make sure we understand the language they speak. If they say cost saving is number one, secondly, risk management, thirdly, growing revenue streams, then that's their language, that's their priority. That's what we need to have in mind at all times. And then the technical details can be what they are. That's not really the thing that we need to communicate in the most detail.
Yeah. I mean, that's important because at the end of the day, data information management system is it's an expensive thing you're building, or it can be expensive because it's not straightforward, it's not simple, and it can very easily turn into a money pit. Something you invest a lot of money in, but you sit with the same problems at the end of the day. So for us to understand, well, what is the value we're looking to extract from the system, that's very important. So like you mentioned, maybe it's cost saving. Maybe that is the ultimate goal of this system. Is we had this previous data infrastructure, our company scaled, our data scaled, it became too expensive to maintain. Can you build infrastructure for us that can help us save costs? And this is a real world example we've dealt with, where the pure goal was to save costs. Versus, our ultimate goal is to get funding. That's a different goal for us. We're not so much looking at cost saving or optimizing for that. We're more looking at maybe data analytics, insights we can generate from the data. That's the thing we're focusing on. So I think it comes down to return on investment at the end of the day. Because like I said, you don't want the system to be a money pit. You want it to be something that's producing fruits. But we when designing the system have to keep that in mind, because the thing you're trying to optimize for, kind of governs what you build at the end of the day.
Great. One thing we haven't spoken about, so in classic project management terms, there are typically three things that, there are more things, but potentially you could boil it down to how long will it take, how much will it cost, and how good it is. So quality, budget, and time. And it's commonly understood that you can't have it all. So if you can pick two, and then the third one is the price you pay for the other two. You can have something very fast, very cheap, and it's going to not be good. Or you can have something really, really good. Really good and slow, and then maybe you can save some money. But if you also want it to be fast, then you're going to spend a lot of money. So with that in mind, Again, important to be on the same page as the client. So the client and we know exactly what the bars are and what the constraints are for timelines, for budgets, and for quality thresholds or quality standards. But those things on their own are not necessarily cast in stone. So what an organization needs today, what's good enough today is maybe not good enough 5 years from now or 10 years from now, or maybe the budget for this financial year is X, but it's not the only budget. There might be another budget the year after. So can you speak about this balancing act between building something that solves today's problem, but that's also built for the future? And how do you do those things? Because just building for the future is not good enough. Only building for today also not good enough. You need both. Have you felt that tension and that dual requirement to do both at the same time?
Yeah. So once again, like all things, I mean, we're not perfect. We got this right. A lot of times we've got it wrong as well. There's always this temptation to optimize for the now, especially if you want to produce results, you want to show the value quickly. Mm-hmm. So it's often tempting to optimize for now. I think for us and for other organizations. Sometimes, just doing something in a sheet quickly, it gives you the answer now, but that's not scalable. You can't keep doing that forever. It's always good to have the long-term mindset and to foresee the problems you might be dealing with a year or two from now. And those are often the hidden costs of a platform. I think we recently wrote an article on prepared layers. And we spoke of the trade-off between using kind of traditional database ways of building prepared layers, so something like using a view or scheduled queries. Those are often tempting at the start when you're building a prepared layer. Is maybe let me just quickly write some SQL and I'll put it in a view, and that's good enough. It produces my table, and you do maybe one or two at the start, and then that starts scaling, and now you have one prepared layer reading from another, and very quickly the complexity is growing. The hidden cost of that is a year or two later, when now there's a new analyst working on the data, and now they have to decipher this maze of tables that are calling tables that are dependent on a sheet someone is maintaining. The hidden cost there is then the human cost of then having to untangle that mess you've made at the start. So it's very difficult to kind of balance this short-term value, long-term, making sure things work in the long term as well. And I think that comes with experience, that comes with understanding the tools you're using. Often it's trial and error. Sometimes you have to make the mistake to know that, okay, next time we have a different tool that we're going to use. Because of the experience we've had before. But yeah, there's never a, like you said, you have I think you call it the iron triangle. You can't have everything at the same time. And it's also our job to help you understand what those trade-offs are that you're making. So that if you are making a short-term trade-off, like we're going to go a bit slower at the start with the goal in mind of being fast in the long term, or being sustainable in the long term, because I think that's also important when building a platform. It's just the sustainability of it in the long run.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, one thing that we tend to do most of the time is we try to build modular solutions, so that in future, if we need to replace one piece of tool with a new technology that has come up, then you won't have to redesign the entire system again. So it's just one piece you replace with another piece, and then that really saves costs.
Awesome. That idea of modularity and building sustainably and with the future in mind triggers two thoughts. I'll tell them now before I forget. So one is training and capacity building, and the other one is AI and the journey that we are on. Because I think those two elements of not just solving the problem and building a solution, but also leaving the client organization in a stronger position to add and to engage and to take ownership, not just as a passive user, but as an active co-builder, I think is what we have been doing. And I want to invite you to speak more about that. So how have we taken the client on a journey, and they are now able to not just use it, but also expand it or think along with us about how this could be upgraded or updated in the future. Second one is about integrating new AI technologies to the platform. But let's first start with the training and capacity building.
Yeah, maybe I'll start with the internal, because I think that the training and capacity building is both within our organization and our team, and the client organization. So maybe Emanuel can speak to the client organization, but internally it's also important for us to build standardized solutions. Like Emanuel mentioned, to build in a modular way, so we can plug and play different solutions. Ultimately, to build capacity within the team. So we like to think of doing repeatable things. So the first time you do something, it takes really long. The second time is faster, and the third time is really fast. So that's the kind of capacity we're trying to build internally, to standardize the code we're using, standardize some of the tools we're using. So internally, that's kind of our view on that. External is different. It's very hard to, if you're the builders and now you have to hand over a platform. It's, once again, it's like throwing a solution over the wall. If you do that, it's guaranteed to fail. Like the platforms we build are really complicated, and if you just have to call Turkey and just look at like all of the different repos and try and understand it, that's really difficult. So yeah, holding workshops with clients, things like that are really important, and Emanuel's played a big role in that.
Maybe to add to that, as an organization, I think we have very strong academic roots, and training is one of the things that we do as well. So when we develop a system, we try to empower the client to be in a position to use it, not just the end product, but also understand all the different pieces that we've put together. And so to do that, there are different ways that we do it, but one is having a workshop with the different technical teams that will be using these solutions on a daily basis to try and empower them to understand the process, so that if they want to build on that, it's not that difficult. The other way we do it is by creating well-detailed documentations. Could be video documentations of the process, so you actually doing the thing and building the thing. So if it's part of the system where the process is going to be a recurrent process, then you want to make sure that the person that is going to take over is well equipped to do that. So we use documentation and videos that the clients and their current teams and future teams can use to learn and understand about the process.
Yeah, it's always tempting to say your code is self-documenting, but at the end of the day, that never really is, right? So the documentation is also really important. Yeah, and kind of all the metadata that lives with the platform, like Emanuel said, the workshops, recording videos, demos of how to do things, so people can always come back and just rewatch it in their own time. The live workshops we found to be very, very powerful. It's a great way of transferring knowledge, sitting in person, working together, solving the problem together. really helps to transfer that knowledge. But to say something is self-documenting is a very dangerous assumption, especially with something like a platform where people might go, people might come, and you kind of want a seamless transition and onboarding experience.
Thank you. So the other thought is about integrating existing and not yet existing AI into the data platforms. So the way I see it is, some years ago, not that many years ago, all you had was your own data, and you had some simple and maybe slightly more advanced algorithms to make sense of the data. But if it didn't exist as a Python library, then maybe you couldn't use it. That's kind of what you had. Maybe you couldn't write your own code. Now, the wealth of third-party tools, large language models, other advanced tools, is just grown so much in volume, and it's also become way more accessible. It's become much easier to just connect to that tool and send your data to the tool, let it do its thing, and get the answer back. And I imagine that's both awesome. It's also very overwhelming, but also very scary and dangerous, because the threshold to start sharing internal data with the world, hoping that nothing will go wrong, that is also increasingly on the radar of organizations. Like, we know we can do it, or we think we can do it, but should we do it? And how is this not going to backfire? So I don't know if either of you want to speak about this experience of clients asking, can we use this tool? We've seen it demoed, or some people are pitching it to us. Should we be using it? Can you integrate it into the platform that you've built for us? And then how do we as builders ensure that cybersecurity, data protection, especially in the context of medical data, is never at risk?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think AI is amazing. It's been a revolution in our industry. I mean, I think everyone here and probably listening is interacting with AI on a daily basis. But yeah, so in terms of integrating it into a data platform, I think us as a company, we're optimistic about the technology. We love it. But because we work with medical data, we, as an organization, do need to be conservative as well. It's all good and well having an API that's very accessible, but that also, like you said, that makes it very dangerous, right? We can't just send the patient's file to ChatGPT and have it tell us what's wrong. Although it's tempting to do that because these models are really good, you shouldn't do that. So us as platform builders, these are kind of the questions we're battling with is, how do we bring this value to our clients? Because everyone wants it, but in a way that's sustainable in the long term as well. Because we spoke a bit earlier about the trade-offs of short-term decisions, building for now and building for the long term. And I think especially with AI, that's very true, because the technology is so new. So it's always tempting. It's always tempting to integrate the newest tool. OpenAI launched something new a week ago, and now we want to add it to our platform. It's very tempting, but often these technologies are not tried and tested yet. You know, it hasn't been validated necessarily at a large scales. And like I said, the security is always a worry, especially for us. So I think internally we have a love for the smaller models, the medium-sized models. I think it's good to be aware of these models as well, and they're a bit easier to integrate in a secure way, and to extend and add it to a platform in a way that protects patient data. Yeah, so we love the technology, but it's good to be aware of the trade-offs you're making and the decisions you're making now, understanding how that's going to impact the future, because you don't, like I said, you don't want to be building a house of cards, and the company you're relying on, the API you're relying on is bankrupt 2 years from now, and now now your house of cards comes tumbling down. So you do want to just be conservative and pick technologies that can stand the test of time.
Then my last question before we go to the audience for some questions is, with all these rapid changes to the building blocks that are available and changes to all of the add-ons and the widgets that you could tap into as you build the platform, there is a real risk that organizations feel overwhelmed and say, I don't know if I want to or can build a new platform or commission a new platform, because I'm scared that whatever we build is going to be outdated and not fit for purpose anymore a year from now. So I'm just going to sit it out, wait for things to calm down, keep using my broken system. I think that's a narrative that is playing in some people's minds. What is the problem with that? Why is that not a great stance? So waiting, no action, in the hope that at some point things will be commoditized or will be clearer and the challenge will be lower.
That's a very good question. So I think the cost of inaction is that the organization keep paying for inefficiencies every day. So reports taking much longer to generate, to be used to inform in decision making, taking much longer. You keep mark timing and having different definitions of truths across different departments. Leads to people losing trust in the data. And because of that, managers and decision makers tend to rely on intuition or even outdated reports to make their decision. And while you are doing that, your competitors are taking advantage and making decisions much quicker using better systems and improving. Whereas as an organization that hasn't really taken action, it means that you end up mark timing or even start moving in the backward direction.
Okay, that's I think that's wise advice. So despite rapid change, making a decision and building something that's fit for purpose now and built for the future is then still better than waiting it out, because it's never going to calm down or stabilize.
Yes, so I think that's the one constant of our industry and the kind of the space we operate in, is that the one inevitable thing is change. So we're always moving forward at 1,000 miles an hour. Every week there's a new tool. And we just spoke about AI, even more so now that people are coding using AI. I feel like it's like every day there's some new feature or some new tool that's coming out. So I think waiting for things to slow down, I don't know if that's, I think it's good. I think maybe accepting the fact that things are changing and building in a way where you can manage that, and the fact that things are changing are not necessarily detrimental to what you're building. So I think, yeah, inaction will lead to you falling behind. Yeah, so I think building in a way where you can keep up and you don't have to rebuild your platform every single time there's a new tool. I think building in a way where you can swap out things and you can, if there's a new better model, you can use that one, and it doesn't take a whole system rebuild to do that.
Okay, thank you. We've reached close to the end of the podcast. So if there's anyone in the audience that has questions for Ulrich or Emanuel, please feel free to write your questions in the chat. We can read along. from experience, it might take a few minutes before people have formulated their questions. While we wait, maybe if you can give a specific example of a system that you have built or contributed to the building of, and maybe like what comes to mind as a win, unexpected or expected. What was this? Wow, that was so good to see. We built it and the results were amazing. And then if you like also, what was this near fatality or challenge, crisis averted, but only by a small margin? Yeah.
Maybe I'll go. I'm not going to mention specific names, but so we have a client who came to us with the question of wanting to extract value from their system they have, their data they have, but essentially the data was on lockdown and no one had access to it. The data was, when we looked at it, we understood why they felt they may or may not be able to get value from it, because it ended up being a very large relational database that was extremely complicated, hundreds of tables, all connected to each other in different ways. So to the layman, it might seem like there is nothing there. It also looks like gibberish. We don't know how to get any value from it. But I think the big win for us was to be able to use our tools like a data warehouse that could, and this was also a large volume of data. So using the horsepower of a data warehouse in the cloud to run complicated joins, to actually put the tables you need together, to produce prepared layers, to build dashboards, to understand what's going on in the business. And I think the thing, among many other nuggets, I think the one big lesson learned from that whole going end to end to the point of having a whole suite of dashboards is, the one thing we learned is the quality of the data was not as good as we thought it was. The way data was being collected across the country wasn't to the standard expected. And this led to a lot of interventions all across the country to improve how staff is using the system. So that was amongst many good things that came out of the system. I think one prominent one. So to know you have bad quality data, you actually need to look at it and see that it's not good quality. The one lesson learned from this same platform we built, same project, I think we made the mistake of optimizing for quick wins in terms of building prepared layers. So when I speak of a prepared layer, I mean it's writing SQL to formulate, to join sources together to create a source of truth, a data set that you can report on, that we all trust, it's validated and reviewed, and we can link our dashboards up to this data set, and we trust the data inside of it. So I think the mistake we made was optimizing for speed in that scenario. So not using tools with proper data governance, proper data lineage. We optimized for speed and just wrote a bunch of complicated SQL queries to join the data together. We produced beautiful dashboards and more dashboards and more dashboards. But then neglected the long-term view there of actually managing those prepared layers. Became very complicated, and there were prepared layers dependent on other prepared layers, and making a change affected multiple things. So you kind of had this domino effect running through the system. So that's one lesson learned from there, was kind of how you set up your prepared layers. The technology you use there is really important. How you manage dependencies between tables, and the tools you choose there really make a difference. So that's one big lesson learned there.
Emanuel?
All right. For me, I think a project that we were involved in is one where the client came to us and told us we have this process of generating these annual reports and a dashboard that we update once a year, but the process is very manual. We are not optimizing the process. We are using Excel to clean the data And every year, people need to spend quite some time cleaning the data, pulling the data, copying it from one Excel file to another. And because of that, it brings the issue not just of time, but the quality of data, because it's very easy to make unintended changes to the data. And the end result is you get plots and dashboards that have data that you cannot really trust. And the other thing is, because the process is very manual, the dashboard becomes outdated very fast. Because if this data was updated a year ago, then for the next 1 year, the dashboard will be showing the same kind of data. And you find that it's not that informative after a given period of time. So we started by trying to automate the process of getting the data where possible, using APIs to fetch data and writing scripts that run automatically to clean the data and produce the views or the prepared layers, like Ulrich has called. And it's from these prepared layers that have very minimal human interaction that we now generate the dashboards and the reports from. So that has really reduced the time that it takes to actually fetch the data, clean it, and have it ready to generate the reports or the dashboards, but also the trust in the data. Because now there is very little human interaction in terms of changing the raw numbers. The data that you see, you can be very sure. Yes, initially the process takes time because you're building for future, but once the infrastructure is in place, then it becomes a very quick process and requires very little human human power.
Thank you. So what you were saying, or if I can summarize, is the intervention, the system that we built, didn't just make it faster and cheaper to produce the outcome, but the outcome was also of higher quality. And so both numerator and denominator, if you say return on investment, were positively changed. That's awesome. We've got 3 questions. I'm going to read them one by one, and we've got a few more minutes, hopefully, if people can stay on to address these questions. So Stefan asks, when you approach a new client, how do you balance promoting potential outcomes from the new platform versus maintain expectations if AI isn't applicable to the client? Or have you been able to select specific clientele over time based on previous successes? That's a very complicated question. I'm not sure if I understand it properly.
I'll take a stab at it. So I think, like I said, we're all lovers of AI, and we're for our clients actively looking for projects where it would make sense for AI to solve the problem. So I think, like I said, so we're more like we don't want to force the solution on anything. We kind of wait for the solution that is perfect for AI, right? We've had problems which we've tried to solve in the past, and we couldn't. But now that AI is here, it actually now is solvable. So I think, don't know if going hunting for problems to solve is the right thing to do. I think it's more waiting for letting the problem define when you use AI. I think that's how you balance that.
Thank you. And then Dr. Luke Sampson is asking, each client case is unique. How would you advise clients to best communicate their challenge or expected outcomes to minimize going around in circles, finding a solution? Is there a good standard format that clients could follow? So their needs and their expectations are different, but can we map it onto a template process to efficiently extract it and then move forward? That's, I think, his question.
Okay,
Emanuel?
I can take a stab on that. So like I initially said, when we start working with a client, we like to have these discovery workshops. And in these workshops, we'll have stakeholders from different departments. And because they have different needs, they have different goals and objectives, we'll try to capture all of them, right? And then try to narrow down to what is key, because not all organizations have massive budgets to do everything that they wish they could do. So sitting together in a room, all the stakeholders from different departments, and trying to narrow down to what are the key things that we can implement, helps us to narrow down and making sure that all the different stakeholders from different organizations are all aligned, and we are moving together at the same pace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe if I can just add to that. I think what we also like to do is just create an exhaustive list of possible things that the different stakeholders could want. Right? Because there are different personas that we deal with in the scoping phase, and different personas want different things out of the platform. So we usually try to create an exhaustive list of everything that this platform needs to do, and then break it down into an impact versus effort matrix. So kind of identify which things are high impact and low effort, kind of low hanging fruit in a way, and what are the things that are really high effort but that won't have that much impact given the goals that we're trying to achieve. So kind of set up the exhaustive list of requirements into a matrix like that, and then figure out, okay, well, within the budget, what are the things that make sense to do?
Yes, I think to add to that, I think having the right people in one room in the same small slice of time is important. So if you have asynchronous, disjointed conversations over email and phones, and you have multiple threads of conversations, that's a recipe for never landing on the scope of the project. But one afternoon or one day, same location, everyone is there, and we are solely there with the purpose of converging on the scope of the project. That I think is very valuable in terms of making decisions and then sticking with it. And the other suggestion or sort of from experience is not relying on people's memories. So when we do an exercise, whether that's a effort over impact or some other pruning exercise, that same day the report needs to be shared with everyone, and that next day it needs to be approved so that we move on and we say, but we've already answered that question, actually. We've made that decision, and here's the exhaustive report. Also now, of course, with AI, we can just record the meeting, we can create a transcript, we can have the summary of the meeting without spending extra time and effort. So documenting the process very well, having the right people in the room, and creating a sense of today, here and now, we're making the decision. I think that's very helpful. The last question is about missing data. I would like to know how you deal with missing data, especially when working with messy data, especially in Python, since it can lead to misleading results. I know in R we can run imputations, so curious about how that looks in Python or other software you use. I have my own thoughts on that, but maybe if you want to start.
No, I think you can go for it.
Yeah, my answer is if R is better at it than Python, then use R. So it's fine so for instance, we have in the past used mice missing imputations by chained equations. That's a very, I would say, industry standard in the field of missing data. And the model to impute the data it's not a single option you have. You can use random forest, you can use other advanced methods to produce these imputations, and then you use a ensemble model to make sense of all of the imputations together and not just pick a single imputation. R, there's a few really good libraries in R that can do that, and if that's the best solution and it solves the problem, then I would say write your SQL code to a certain point until you need Python, then write some Python until you need R, and then use a little bit of R and go back to Python where it makes most sense. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. That's more efficient than forcing a language that wasn't really built or that doesn't have an existing solution for the problem. I don't know if you would agree or that's a poor practice.
No, I totally agree. And it's something that also has happened to us as a team. Sometimes we're building models, sometimes classical statistical models. And in many cases, you find that R has more advanced packages to build the models. Then we write our script in a way that we can write a short R script that can call the model and generate the outcomes that we want, and then plug it into whichever language we are writing, whether it's SQL to generate a dashboard, or it's Python to generate a report, or even a Markdown document.
Yeah, in South Africa, we used to multiple languages, and I think all of us here in this room speak multiple languages, and sometimes the best word for the situation isn't in English, but it's in Swahili or it's in Afrikaans, and we are actually used to quickly swapping out, saying this one phrase in another language, and then moving back to this lingua franca. So yeah, I think the same applies to computational languages. All right, thank you so much, everyone, for sticking it out and your interest, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks for the questions as well. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.